Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. From time to time on this channel, I tend to kind of step in it. And I've never been one to kind of shy away from controversial things, not just on this channel, but in life. One of my better qualities, and it's also one of my worst, is that I'm a little stubborn. Just ask my wife. And I tend to not back down when I see a pretty defining line between right and wrong. And so I want to cover a subject today that is on that path. We talk about a lot of things on this channel, and you probably hear it on other channels, all the stuff that's going wrong with the world today. All the changing of policies, the mandates, the financial collapse, all the things that's going wrong with the world today. We hear about it. We talk about ways to prepare for it. But today's video is a little different. I want to tell you what I believe is the root cause of all that, because you see all of those things that we talk about from time to time, they're just symptoms to a very greater problem, a very deeper problem that we have in our world today. And if you and I and others like us don't wake up and realize that and choose the side that we're on, I think we're facing a lot of devastation in our future. Now, I realize that not everyone that follows this channel believes the same way that I do. But I also realize that all those that follow this channel tend to be pretty smart people. So today, I will be reading some scriptures from the Bible, but this isn't a Bible necessarily video. This isn't a preaching video. So I ask that you give me some patience and a little bit of leeway and let me explain and just hear me out of where I'm going with this. Because even for those of you that don't adhere to biblical teachings, I guess, most of you are intelligent enough to realize that there is some truths in it, and there's some things that are very important that we should probably adhere to. Most religions, whether they are true or false in the whole of the religion, there's usually some nuggets of wisdom in them. So for those of you that don't adhere to biblical teaching, at least try to see the wisdom in some of the things that I'm saying. But this isn't all just about the Bible. So bear with me on that. There's a lot going on in our world. We talk about it often. We talk about the things that we need to do to prepare. A lot of the things that we talk about, though, in the end, really are just kind of surface problems. We live in a world, and especially a country, that has a big issue when it comes to morality. We are losing it. We're destroying it. We're completely shredding every sense of moral standards. And as we walk away from those moral standards, and more greater walking away from God and turning our back on God, we're going to continually fall apart. And one of the things that I talk about often on here is that I believe that we are in the midst of the collapse of our civilization. And so that's something that I want to talk about today, that I believe that we are. And I've got some Bible scriptures and some scientific researched evidence to back up my theories. I want to start by turning to a scripture that many of you have probably heard, many of you know. It's in Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 and 39 through 39. And this is Jesus, Yeshua, is speaking. He says, "For as the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For in those days before the flood, there were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man." He's saying, in the last days, in the future, it will happen that humanity will once again be like the days of Noah, just kind of falling apart. I want to read a few more, so bear with me. If we go back to the days of Noah, it talks about in Genesis 6, verse 5, "Then the Lord saw that it was wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." So every intent of his thoughts were only evil continually. Let's go into kind of the things that maybe what those were. because it just says evil continually. In 2 Timothy 3, chapter 3, verses 1 through 5, again, we're talking about how people will be in the last days, in the end, or as the end draws near. But realize this, that in the last days, difficult times will come. For men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. Avoid such men as these. Going back to Genesis, where it talks about evil continually, I wanted to kind of dig into that. Well, what does that mean, evil? I mean, you and I kind of have an idea of what evil means, but what does the Bible say about evil? It says in Mark 7:21 verses 23, this is again Jesus, Yeshua, for from within, out of the heart of men proceed evil things, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. All of these evil things come from within and defile a man. So there's some example of evil things. And we've seen in these other scriptures what they're talking about throughout the Bible, of what's going to happen in the last days with evilness. Now, are we there? Are we at that point? Have you looked around yourself lately? There's a lot of evilness. Not just debauchery, not just lasciviousness, but also this aspiring to godliness, but yet denying its power. I want to show just a little clip here of the governor of New York, the new governor of New York. Well, I'll just let it speak for yourself. She's speaking in a mega church in New York. I'm not exactly sure where or which one, but I'm just going to let it kind of speak for itself.
During this time. And you know what? God did answer our prayers. He made the smartest men and women, the scientists, the doctors, the researchers. He made them come up with a vaccine. That is from God to us. And we must say, thank you, God. Thank you. And I wear my vaccinated necklace all the time to say, I'm vaccinated. All of you. Yes, I know you're vaccinated. You're the smart ones, but there's people out there who aren't listening to God and what God wants. You know this. You know who they are. I need you to be my apostles. I need you to go out and talk about it and say, we owe this to each other. We love each other. Jesus taught us to love one another. And how do you show that love? But to care about each other enough to say, please get vaccinated because I love you. I want you to live. I want our kids to be safe when they're in schools. I want you to be safe when you go to a doctor's office or to a hospital.
What to say? This is the new church. This is the new religion that we have today. We turn away from what we have been taught growing up, regardless of our religious beliefs, that there are certain rights and wrongs, there are certain moral standards, moral values, having a moral compass as a nation, as a people, as families, and yet we're being told now that that's all different. And they get up and they talk about things, claiming a level of godliness, but denying its power. I could go on showing you current things that I've found on the internet, and I actually had planned on doing that, and then I changed my mind. Video clips of how people are behaving. We've all seen the sexual immoralities that are just plaguing this nation. It is an epidemic. We're seeing how there seems to be no right or wrong, no moral standard anymore when it comes to sexual immorality. Even to the point now that pedophilia is considered a sexual orientation. These things that we are faced in this nation, this is really the beginnings and the core, the root cause of the decline of this nation. It's not an economic thing that's causing it. It's not because we elected a certain person in office, whether he won or not. It's not because of our global stance on something. It's not because we're spending money here. It's not because they've, are wanting to force people to take something. Those aren't the root cause of the problem here in America. The root cause is because we've turned our back on right and wrong. We've turned our back on moral standards. We've turned our back on God. And because of this, I believe that we are watching the collapse of our nation. It is falling apart, and there's not really anything that we can do about it at this point. This is why we must prepare. I'm going to read a few things here out of some articles. I know this may be a little drier video than normal. And I will warn you that some of these things, while these are scientifically researched articles, they may say have some content in them that you may not want your children to listen to. So if you have children present and you don't like them to hear things that may not be what you allow in your home, I'll do my best to keep it as PG rated as possible. It's an article here that I found online, and I found several. And this one is a portion of the article is said the reasons why Rome fell. Reasons of the Roman Empire, why it fell. And it says here the decline in morals. A decline in morals, especially in the upper classes. Now, after what I just read out of the Bible and what I'm about to read here, I want, as I'm reading and as I'm saying these things, I want you to think of what you are aware of going on here in America and compare them. Compare those things. Is there a comparison? Are we close to that point, or have we gone beyond that? Or maybe not at all. A decline in morals, especially in the rich upper classes and the emperors, had a devastating impact on the Romans. Immoral and promiscuous sexual behavior, including idolatry and orgies. Emperors such as Tiberius kept groups of young boys for his pleasure. Incest by Nero, who also had a manslave castrated so he could take him as his wife. Elagabalus, who forces a Vestal virgin into marriage. Commodius, with his harems of concubines who enraged Romans by sitting in the theaters dressed in women's garments. The decline in morals also affected the lower classes and slaves. Religious festivals such as Saturnalia and Bacchanala, where sacrifices, ribald songs, lewd acts, and sexual promiscuity were practiced, bestiality and other lewd and sexual explicit acts were exhibited in the Colosseum arena to amuse the mob. Brothels and forced prostitution flourished. Widespread gambling on the chariot races and gladiatorial combats, massive consumptions of alcohol, and sadistic cruelty toward both man and beast in the arena. A lot of this stuff kind of sounds like you could be talking about America right now. And if you don't believe that, if you're not aware of that, as much as you may not want to see certain things, hear certain things, and spend the time online, you should actually do the research and see that these things are in fact happening in America. Publicly accepted acts, much similar to that. This here is a peer-reviewed article. You should be seeing it right about now. The causes of state collapse. Insights from 4 pre-modern states. Now, I'm not going to read this whole article. This is a section of this scientific research article. Basically, it says the initial causes of collapse may be difficult to discern because of principal factors. And it goes on to talk about, all these possible factors. He said, though, it says in here that most notably we found that states organized around good government with its implied expectation of mutual moral obligation are exceptionally exposed to the risk of collapse when the leadership turns away from the principles and practices that undergird citizen expectations. To illustrate the play out of this kind of collapse scenario, we provide brief historical summaries of 4 cases: Ming Dynasty, Mughal, the Roman High Empire, and the Republic of Venice. These 4 exemplified fiscal economies of largely joint production and are among the higher scoring policies in the sample for good government. And then it goes on to say how each of these, they basically turn their back on morality. Yet eventually moral lapses in the central leadership brought loss of citizen confidence, decline in fiscal health, government services, demographic decline, growing inability of the central authorities to control crime and administrative corruption, and the eventual rise of opposition movements and political polarization. In this article here, it talks about how these collapses of these types of nations are silent sometimes. It says when collapses occur more slowly, it is even more difficult to find anyone acknowledging the process at all. This was true in the late Roman Empire, where one finds letters exchanged between partitions explaining that the roads were often unused this time of the year, but acknowledged that the fundamental changes were taking place. The collapse of the Roman Empire was much less much less the constant burning of cities, and so much as it was the GDP equivalent shrinking by about 1% a year, while remaining more or less the same on the books. Sounds more and more like the world that we're living in today, doesn't it? This is why I believe, I'm trying to choose my words properly, this is why I believe that the things that we're seeing play out around us are much bigger than we're aware of. There is a spiritual warfare going on. I say that often. The things that are being allowed on the public stage, things that are being allowed on the internet, things that are being promoted, what is being taught to children as being okay. There are countless videos recently all over the internet that I'm not going to play on here because they are, the things that they talk about are just too much to play on my channel. But there are parents that have gone before school boards, and you've probably seen some of these, and they're actually reading books that their children have been issued by the school, reading books that are in the libraries of the school, that the school teachers are telling these kids to read. And the sexual explicitness of them is just, it blows my mind. As a 43-year-old man, I don't know that I've ever read this kind of stuff. And they're being taught to children in elementary school and middle school and high schools. And they're being taught that this kind of behavior is okay, and even encouraged that they should explore and experiment as a child with each other in these ways. This is what's being taught with your tax dollars as we sit by and we allow it to happen. And don't think, for those of you that are not religious, for those of you that don't believe in the Bible, don't think that well, it doesn't necessarily mean those that turn away from God or turn away from the Bible. Here's another article, and it's talking about, again, collapses of civilization. In this part of the article here, it says, and yes, a religious and moral framework to promote social unity. In the article, it shows that there's never been a successful nation that did not have a religious basis, a moral religious basis. Lastly, a civilization must have a religious or moral framework to promote unity and to provide a model for cooperation and social cohesion. In most instances, a popular religion emerges that attracts a majority of citizens and serves as an anchor for the society's moral guidelines. As historian Will Durant points out, there is no significant example in history before our time of a society successfully maintaining moral life without the aid of religion. The importance of religion to a civilization's continued existence cannot be underestimated. History has shown that when a society becomes morally corrupt, civility is destroyed. The society becomes unstable, and inevitably, the nation slides towards collapse. I believe it was just yesterday that the person that runs the White House made some kind of statement that this pandemic is not going to be over until 98% of everyone gets this, which is another way of saying it's never going to be over, because they're never going to get 98%. They know that. It was once 70%. I remember someone, I think it was Dr. Fakey, saying that at least 70% will go back to normal. Now it's 98%. These are goals that they'll never get. And so they're basically sending the message to us that this is never going to go away. Well, folks, this collapse of America isn't going to go away just because in 2022 we elect a new Congress, or in 2024 we elect a different president. It doesn't matter who that person is. This isn't going away. These problems, our economy, the rapid attack on our freedoms, on our liberties, this is not going to go away if we turn our back on morals. That is the problem in America. That is the core problem. The completely destruction of our moral foundation that is based on biblical religious authority. This is what's happening to America, folks, and it's not going to get any better. And this is why we should prepare, I believe, because it's not about little individual things that could happen. It's the fact that we are living in the times of Noah. Whether we are living specifically in the end times or not, that is for up to you to figure out. But I'm telling you, based on all the research that I have done over the last several weeks, a lot of the reading that I've done, I am by more convinced that today we are living in a time period that is just as lascivious as the time period of Noah. That we are collapsing around ourselves and no one cares. We're all eating and drinking and giving in marriage. We're partying it up, posting TikTok videos. Oh, everything's great, while the world around us is collapsing, while our nation, our civilization is collapsing. We've turned our back on God. We've turned our back on moral foundations, on family principles, on right and wrong, on justice. We've turned our back on these things, and guess what? Now this is what we have to deal with. Folks, I want to encourage you in every possible way to get yourselves ready, get yourselves prepared, get your houses in order, prepare mentally, physically, spiritually, pull your children out of public schools if at all possible, because I believe that we're headed down a path that we can't really turn around from. And no one really knows how bad it will be, but I suspect it's not going to be an easy path to head down. All right, folks, thank you all for watching. Catch you in the next video.